Hello, and thank you for joining us for this informational session on the campaign for SYA. And I'm delighted that it's going to be a conversation today with our resident director in Italy, Pat Scanlon, and Katie Kurtz, who is a former student in Italy with him. And we're hoping Harrison Hunt will be joining us as well, who was also a student there in Katie's year. I'm Tom Hassan. I'm the president of SYA, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today. I want to start by thanking you for taking time to learn a little bit more about the campaign for SYA. Actually, this is our first comprehensive campaign in the 56-year history of School Year Abroad. And also to learn a little bit more today about curricular innovation, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. Let you know this is the third in our Campaign 101 series. The first is when we had our co-chairs of the campaign talk about the overall approach to our fundraising effort. The second one was actually featuring two resident directors and students of theirs who had received financial aid, and we wanted to talk about that as an important initiative of this campaign as well. If you haven't had a chance to view these two, I would encourage you to do so on the SYA YouTube channel. Just as we've done the last two sessions, we're going to be again recording this one with the hopes that those who couldn't be here today will be able to view it in future time. And also wanted to take some time at the end to take your questions. So if you do have questions during this, please put it in the box and we'll see if we can get to them. And a quick note about the campaign itself. This is now entering our final year of the campaign. We've been able to raise over $12 million, which is terrific, and a goal of $18 million. So we have some work to do between now and the end of June. But we're excited by the support that we've received and the conversations we continue to have about it. Now I want to start to talk a little bit about today's topic, which is curricular innovation. Back in 2017, I worked with the Board of Trustees of SYA, and we approved a strategic plan that really kind of mapped out where we wanted to go in SYA. I have to say a little bit about curriculum at SYA. Traditionally, it's been mirroring what has happened back at the sending schools. And that's important. We teach math and English and of course the language and the culture while students are there. But we realized that today's students really want hands-on experience to really literally get out of their seats, get into the local community and beyond, and really interact and use those lessons they're learning in the classroom and applying them to day-to-day situations. So we've really been able to make great progress on that front. And in fact, I want to thank Pat right now because Italy was really our test site for all this. And he worked long hours and with creativity and energy to really kind of move this along. And now the nice thing is that at all our sites, we have followed Italy's lead. And I have to say this, that we survey students at the end of the year, and the survey results of their experiences only gone sky high in kind of reframing this curriculum as we have. But I'm going to let the folks on this screen with me to talk a little bit more in depth about that. What I want to do is, in a few moments, I'm going to ask Pat and the students to talk. But let me first introduce the two of them that are on the screen right now, and that's Pat Scanlon, who's been our resident director for about 2 decades over in Italy. He began life there as the English teacher, quickly rose to run the school and does a phenomenal job. In fact, Pat, I'll embarrass you. I think you're the unofficial mayor of Viterbo. Everyone knows you in town and loves you. And also they're the ones to kind of keep an eye on the students for us too. So along with you. So thanks for that. And Katie Kurtz came to SYA through her time in Denver. She was at the high school, Denver School of Science and Technology in Colorado, and is now in her, you can see her backdrop there, she's in her dorm room at Bowdoin College. And if Harrison joins us, he came to us through St. Paul's School in New Hampshire, and he is now a sophomore at Georgetown. So without further ado, let me shift gears from describing this and really begin the conversation. And I'm going to actually turn to Katie. And Katie, one thing I do is when I talk to alums, probably the first question I ask them, and now you're the young alum, is how did you find out about SYA?
That's a great question. I feel like for everybody it's so different. But for me, the story was kind of funny. I reached freshman year of high school and I'd been at the same school all through middle school. And I realized I really wanted to change. And actually, freshman winter, my parents were at a Christmas party and they were talking to someone. And lo and behold, the parents are saying, "Oh, yeah, tomorrow we're flying to Italy." And of course, why are we flying to Italy? And they were going to visit their daughter at SYA. And my mom came home and said, "You have to look into this program. This is crazy. You'll love living abroad." And so freshman year, I kind of had this in my mind, like I want to look into it. And sophomore year, when it came time to kind of apply, I got caught up and I looked at all the semester and year-long schools I could find that would allow me to graduate on time, SYA being one of them. And I actually got waitlisted from my top choice, which was the mountain school. And in that decision realized, I want to go. I want to go abroad. Like I want to take a leap of faith on this one. And while it was kind of intimidating to go away for the year, it's like, this is going to be amazing. This is out of my comfort zone. And so before I even heard back from the waitlist mountain school, I said yes to SYA, kind of hoping that it was going to be a great experience. And then realizing the kind of, oh no moment, like I signed up to go move abroad. And I definitely do not regret the decision. It was so much better than I could have anticipated.
I'm delighted that you did that. And how did you kind of research SYA? Was it through the website and talking to this young woman who's over there? Did that find out more?
Yeah, so obviously my school is not like a sending school, so nobody had ever studied abroad. I think I was the third student to ever have taken a year away from high school and still graduated. And so it was really rare, and I decided to do a bunch of research through the website, and then I attended every single kind of webinar I could get my hands on, looked at all of the old like videos that students had put up on YouTube from prior years, and then ended up meeting with a few students who had come back or who were, at the time, it was kind of late sophomore year. So I met with a student who was just getting back that summer and we kind of talked it through. I was fortunate to be able to meet people in person and know a couple people to then help me make my decision.
And Katie, that year that you had in Italy, what are the kind of most memorable, maybe one or two experiences that you had? What's hangs with you?
I feel like I could describe everything, but one very memorable moment was essentially the first weekend we're there, you get thrown into the incredible festival, the Festival of Santa Rosa, which is the patron saint. And for me, I really spoke no Italian whatsoever, but I was fortunate to get a host family that was so excited to have me there. They kind of just took me along and took me everywhere. My host brother would drag me with all of his friends. And I think that first weekend, I have all these memories of wandering to places and not knowing how I got there. And it was incredible to see that I was just part of everything. And I started to understand almost immediately, because you have to kind of get in the rhythm right away. You kind of realize that whatever you want to happen is definitely not going to happen because you're now Italian and you just kind of function like the Italians. And so having that kind of memory is something that I look back on every single year. This year when Santa Rosa didn't happen, like I was distraught. My friends from Italy, my best friends were there. We all like talked about it. I talked to my host family about it, and it's something I will never forget. And then on the other end of the year, I think probably one of the most like iconic SYA moments was in Sicily. So our school trip, we went down to Sicily. And as I think SYA kind of plays out, it was kind of happenstance, total just kind of whatever happens, happens. And my friend and I were walking to a palace in Italy, and I got a call from Mr. Scanlon, and it was like, "Hey, we're meeting in a piazza outside the hotel. If you want to buy a fish, the markets are going to close soon, but buy a fish and meet us there." And I don't typically eat seafood, but I was like, you have to say yes to this. And so my friend and I literally ran across the city to one of the big markets, and we bought a fish. And the instructions were to just put it in the hotel and tell them you to fish for the fridge. And so we ran back to the hotel, which was quite a distance from where we were, with this fish in hand. My friend was vegetarian, so she had like no interest in the matter. And we ended up like storing this fish in the hotel fridge and retrieving it that night. And we cooked fish on the piazza. And it is probably one of the best moments of the entire year, getting to learn how to cook fish and eat it as a big group. We ran into some Italian friends that some of the other SYers had made. And it was definitely one of the most memorable experiences I think I'll ever have.
Great. Pat, you might want to comment on that moment. Do you remember that one?
I had forgotten, and until this moment, so I was just laughing. The BYOF evening was like there was a gentleman who made his living with a grill in this piazza on this corner, and you could buy what he was cooking, or you could bring your own, and the prices were reduced if you brought your own fish. But it was really, really a lot of fun. Katie, thank you for reminding me about that. I do remember it occasionally. And if you recall that, Ms. Kelleher's daughter ate one of the fish's eyes, just maybe on a dare. She said it wasn't.
I did as well, which is almost crazier because she did it. She's like a 7-year-old, and she's like, I'm gonna do it. And me being competitive was like, I'm also gonna do it. And so we were like eating the eyes out of the fish on a string of dares.
There we go. And Pat, why don't you talk a little bit, I mentioned earlier about the curricular innovation, and from your perspective and having been part of SWA for a long time, do you want to talk about the evolution of that process?
Absolutely. Over time, the teachers, the families were noticing that the students were probably making less progress with their language. And we've not done any hard research on this, but it was probably due to the prevalence of being able to remain in English through social media and the ease of access to English-speaking movies, and the ease of being able to make phone calls home. And so it was in our consciousness for a while that we needed to do something that was more deliberate, and that our students weren't necessarily living in the same world that they had been in maybe 20 years ago. I recall that I heard the term Facebook for the first time in 2007, when some of the students were crazy to latch on to it because it had been made available to high school students at the time, and I learned about it through them. But we all now know what world we're living in, and made a deliberate effort to design a curriculum based on a mission, which was first, that would take full advantage of the place we were in, and rather, as you alluded to, Tom, having a mission that was similar to what a sending school's mission might be in the United States, departed from that and said, let's be more deliberate about using the place where our students live and go to school as their actual classroom, from right outside the doors throughout the country on trips. And that was a sea change for many of us. And so we had this modern problem where social media and access to English was inhibiting our students' growth, especially in language, but also in cultural understanding. And I find it interesting and a little ironic that we chose a 100-year-old educational philosophy, probably proposed first by, maybe Dewey, that said students learn better by doing things. So it's easy to state, and I know we have Katie on this call to tell us about how she experienced that, and I just want to touch very quickly on how that has meant a retooling of how teachers teach, and that's ongoing. It's a work in progress. What we're seeing, and I think Katie will demonstrate this tonight, are happier kids, kids that are just more engaged with the novelty around them and the richness around them than they were previous. And so whereas education and to educators is often having to suspend gratification, and in SYA we have them for a year, they leave, we sometimes lose entire contact with our alumni. We were starting to see students living more happily right in our midst and enjoying the moment right as it was happening, despite, and maybe Katie will share with you tonight too, struggles that are necessary to this kind of education, which seeks not to provide answers, and on the contrary, seeks to provide challenges and continues to up those challenges as students master the ones below them. So that's a general broad brush answer to your question, Tom, and that was the motivation and the impetus behind the curricular innovations that we came up with.
And Pat, could you give an example of how a course kind of shifted to that? Is there a particular exercise you want to highlight, or in general, how
Sure.
teachers kind of shifted their curriculum?
A course or the injection of what we call a fieldwork day meant that we were going to have, and we're going to hold ourselves to, 1 day per week when students did not come to school, or if they did come to school, we completely departed from the schedule we were doing to do something outside of the routine that a block schedule might hold them to. So we picked Wednesday because that was the day when most things could be open, when students would have challenge activities outside of class that was integrated with what some of the classes they were taking. Often they might not be in the class that was being focused on the field work, but we've deemed valuable toward language acquisition or the understanding of cultural competence. And so that would be one example, Tom, that we had a pretty non-traditional schedule where students were, and most of those activities, we challenged ourselves to make it so students did them without us being present. And so you could imagine the challenges for teachers to devise projects and activities that would demonstrate that students had done things without witnessing them doing them. That required an immense amount of trust, and it also required excellent design that I have to say we're still learning about, because it's a way different way of approaching how students do things, especially if you can't be with them. And I'll let Katie maybe later give us an example or two of some of the things that she remembers about fieldwork. But our Capstone project, we think, is a really exciting end project. But even our math and English curricula rely on the mission. The math program is challenging in that the teacher doesn't lecture, provides challenges for many students, Katie included. But everything is integrated by our mission that helps us get our students to have the most beneficial experience possible in the world we live in.
Right, a lot of good stuff in there. Let me pull out some of the things. Katie, do you want to talk about a field day project, or you want to highlight for us that?
Yeah, I think one that captures what Mr. Scanlon was saying about using classwork was really, we had a trip to Arezzo, which is the town where the movie La Vita è Bella was filmed. And it's really cool because the center of the town is still almost identical to what it portrays in the movie. And the set was really the town you're in. And so that Wednesday I took art history, and I was also in agroecology, so the food science class. And that Wednesday it was quite a long train ride. I think bought tickets the day before, and it was a couple hours at least up. And then we arrived, and we were just kind of like, all right, so you had to, for my art history class, I had to visit a church and then find these different kind of scenes in the murals on the wall and write about them. And so I did that, and we had to figure out, where the church was and figure out what the scenes were and decode the Italian to understand like the meaning behind them. And then as a group for the Italian class, we had to recreate a scene from the movie. So there were several stores. We picked a little scene where like the boy and his dad are in a store, and the actual storefront is still there. And so though it's vacant, we were able to recreate the whole scene, and that was really cool. We had to test, your Italian and also cooperation, because there again were no adults around. So to figure out where the scene was and what the scene was, you had to kind of re-listen to it over and over. And then I think for me, one of the most exciting parts of that day was our agro assignment. It was very specific, and I've looked back on it and I'm still kind of amazed that we were able to figure this out. But we essentially had to find a bunch of different types of cheese that were all produced within a certain like radius of the town. So it was testing your ability to like figure out local products and then learn about the type of cheese. And so we went into a bunch of different small restaurants and small kind of agriturismo, so like local product kind of shops, to figure out where all of these cheeses were from. And you'd kind of go up to them, and in your Italian, they kind of looked at you strange. You're like, okay, I need to know where local cheese is and what milk it's made from and how long it was cured and, where you bought it, and then figure out where exactly it was from so we could make like a little map And that was a very fun assignment. And then obviously you took the train home, and on the train back, everyone's like swapping numbers and making sure we got everything correct and taking, sharing photos of all the labels. And then we used the stuff later that week. I think that was part of our cheese unit when we made our own cheese.
Great. I hope you got to sample some of the cheeses when you're over on this
Of
field day.
course. Of course.
Good. Pat, you mentioned earlier that a capstone, and we've done some changes in terms of the cadence of the school year. And so capstone obviously comes at the end, and then we have an immersion unit at the beginning of the year. Do you want to describe those two things and how they are different than what had typically taken place for SYAers?
Yeah, about 10 or 12 years ago, the state of the art in abroad education was to move from an introductory experience where students were just dumped into a situation to having them adapt to their families, get a little bit of orientation, and then 3 weeks later go on an orientation trip to basically debrief that and look at how the initial part of the year had sunk in and what kids were experiencing. And what we did instead was move all of that and sort of combine that, where we would take about 2 or 3 weeks, really primarily focus on language, while math and English might get started, so they would have the amount of time that they needed to have a legitimate course, but that would culminate in a trip. But much of the immersion experience was designed to orient, in some of the times the most literal way, like what direction are you going, but orient in abstract ways as well. So examples of activities that might be there would be to eavesdrop on conversations and try to pick out even syllables that you might be able to understand. We used a lot of it as markers so that students would have, Katie said she got to Italy with no Italian experience, but even after a couple of weeks, there are some things that students have learned, and they put these markers down to be able for them to feel the satisfaction of the growth, but for the teachers to be able to have standards by which growth could be measured. So the immersion experience was not just linguistic, however, it was cultural. It happened to include this giant festival that Katie was talking about, and just provided a great deal of content, again, using our surroundings. There were architectural components to it as well, artistic, historical, where students start learning about the place they're living in, knowing how to get to and from where they live. In some cases that was easier than others, depending on how far away they lived. And then at the end of the year, the Capstone Project, which was very legitimately driven by students, but within a framework that we insisted on. And that framework, the standards we had were, can that be done only here? Because if you can do what you're proposing, student, somewhere else, we're not going to approve it. It had to have a language component. So by launching the idea of that as early as January, students got to start thinking about this. And I hope on the call today that Katie will talk about the evolution, not only about what she arrived at, but also how she arrived there, because it remains for us in part of our lore, how she shifted her thinking to get to what she was doing and how it benefited her. And then I'll let her in on her legacy and how that has remained with us to this day.
Great. And before I turn to Katie, I'm going to welcome Harrison. How you doing there, Harrison?
Hi, sorry about that. I had an exam that took a lot longer than I initially expected.
I hope it went well. So thank you for joining us. And I'll get to you in just a minute. Katie, do you want to describe your capstone project?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I originally wanted to do something using the language component of Italy because I was really fascinated with the evolution of Italian. And again, as Mr. Scanlon said, we started thinking about this in January. So essentially January, February, and March, I was like planning on doing something linguistic. And then I arrived like mid-March and realized like that was just not what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in the country because I could study the language in college, but I couldn't like live Italy abroad, as Mr. Scanlon saying. And so I chose to do something tangible, but I had no idea what that was. And there was actually a day after school when we were kind of cleaning up from a agro project, and Mr. Scanlon and I were in the classroom, and at least an hour after everyone else had left, like picking stuff up. And we got started, and he mentioned this thing called the Via Francigena, which is a pilgrimage that runs from Canterbury, England to Rome, and it connects the dots all the way through there so you can hike it. And I had done some hiking prior to my year in Italy and was really interested in the idea of walking, because for me, it's one of the best ways to physically see a place, because you're moving at such a slow pace. You get to just absorb it. And you spend so much time encountering situations you didn't think were possible, especially in the small towns that I passed through. You just run into these situations that you never thought you would end up in. And that was really cool to me. So I decided that I was going to just kind of go for it. And I ended up having to plan out, I think I walked it in like 7 or 8 days over my AP and like finals weeks, essentially. So I started the first one before spring break, and it became more of a logistic project than I would have wanted, because I had to sleep at home every single night. And so instead of being able to, you know, go from one place to the next and then arrive and then stay there, I had to then get home, which one of the hardest things about living in a small town such as Viterbo is the transportation. And so I kind of learned how to navigate that, as well as getting to walk from Montefiascone, which is the town just kind of north of us, all the way down to Rome. So it was just over 100 kilometers. And because I walked that, I became a pilgrim of the Via Francigena. After arriving in Rome, you can collect stamps along the way. And if you present that passport, they will give you an official certificate. So that was really cool. And as kind of Italians will tell you, nothing's open after lunch. And so it took me all the way until the very last leg to get the timing right, so that I wasn't arriving in a town that was desolate and trying to find this stamp, which nobody would have, and everyone was like sleeping, and trying to get all of that to line up was so much fun, beyond just like getting to walk through the Italian countryside after and before AP exams.
Oh, that's terrific. And you and I were talking just before we started the seminar, and now you're at college and you're majoring in Italian as part of your life, which is terrific. And so you got those great memories of being in Italy and doing that walk. That's great. Harrison, I'm going to turn to you. I'm going to dial back a little bit. I did ask Katie the question of how she found out about SWA, and I know you're in a very unique club, which is you've done SWA back to back. You were in Spain one year and then you were in Italy the next. So tell us a little bit about two things, how you found out about SWA and why you decided to do a second year.
So I found out about SYA. I was currently attending St. Paul's University, or not university, St. Paul's School. I'm in university now. I was attending St. Paul's School in Concord, New Hampshire, and they offered a program to do a year abroad in Spain. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And I took a leap and decided to do it. And it was the best year of my life. And I learned that it was possible for me to do another year in Italy. And I had so much fun, but also just such a personal growth during my time in Spain. I just really didn't want to return to a traditional high school environment in the States and kind of leave that behind. So I took another leap and I did SY Italy, and it was also one of the greatest years of my life, and absolutely no regrets in doing that.
Do you want to pick out a moment in either Spain or Italy that really defines your SYA time?
Oh gosh. I think my favorite moment was definitely making wine with Mr. Scanlon and in agroecology. I think it was just the coolest experience that we were able to just start from scratch and go into this with no prior knowledge about how any of how any of it worked, how we actually got wine from just grapes. And we ended up with great bottles of wine just made by us, which was definitely something I had never heard of any other students doing anywhere else in the world.
Pat, do you want to describe a little bit about that course? Because it's been mentioned a few times now.
Well, as far as that is concerned, I will say specifically to Harrison, there are still bottles for both of you when you get here. I think I have about 80 of the Fiore and about 45 of the Torchiato. It's in a nice, cool cellar. It'll be here when you get back. So, and to Katie, I wanted to just say that your legacy is that we're doing your Capstone project now. And there are about 12 of us between some friends, but Mr. Turner, Mrs. Turner, Mr. Gatti at times, Ms. Latella. And this weekend, we're going to be walking from San Quirico d'Orcia to Radicofani, which means we will have done about 214 of the, from Canterbury. And I will make the entire thing before I die. I will do it all. So you have left that legacy on us. The agroecology course was because students wanted a lab science course and we were developing the mission. It was time to develop a course in parallel to the mission. Whereas some of the courses that we're teaching, most of the electives, need to be sort of retrofitted to our new innovations in curriculum. We built the agroecology course in tandem as we were developing the mission for that year, and I think it was 16, 17. So it basically means that we're doing a class that takes full advantage of the area by looking at food products from here, local food products. You heard one example, the wine was another, where students participate in making them with the understanding of the processes behind them. And then naturally and sometimes spontaneously comparing them to the food they may be accustomed to in the United States or wherever they lived, to show, and because this is still an agricultural area where, old-fashioned methods are still being used to produce what we consider some of the best food in the world.
That's terrific, terrific. And Harrison, as you just got on, Katie was describing her capstone project. Do you want to describe yours?
Yeah, so my project focused on fashion and I guess the perception of masculinity and the identity of like male gender in Italy, since it's something that's so different from I guess the perceptions of that same element in the United States. And we learned in class, I took both of Professor Gaudi's classes, and we talked a lot about fascism and its impacts on posteriori and even modern times in Italy. And I felt like that was really something I wanted to focus in on. And being in Italy, one of the fashion capitals of the world, I really wanted to also integrate fashion into that. So first thing I did was asked my host mom. I told her, this is kind of what I'm thinking of doing. Who can you get me in touch with? And she got me in touch with a local guy. He actually owns a retail shop, designs a lot of his own clothes. And I was actually able to make a brand out of it as my capstone, which was really, really cool.
Great, great. Pat, do you want to comment on their two capstones? Anything that
Well, so Katie's was, like I said, one thing that she left out, and I don't know if you remember this, was that, Katie, you were determined to do something that would help you in college. And that talk we had afterward, where I was pushing you to do something that you would love, ended up also helping you in college. And that shift in focus made you so happy. And I, of course, walked that last leg with you. You may have lamented having to sleep at home every night, but those blisters on your feet wouldn't have let you do too many more days in a row. I can assure you. You walked the last leg in Tivas because your feet had been pretty beat up stacking those stages together. Harrison's was just original and unique. And so I sat through that, and the other students who on the panel who watched that were introduced to just brand spanking new ideas based on old trends that he put together. And so one of the reasons I liked having both of these students on here is to talk about, because both those capstone projects are so memorable to me. And some of the what you extracted, Harrison, from your thinking showed me, I remember just thinking, I would never have come up with some of the ideas that you were coming up with. And I believe your classmates applauded at the end of your presentation thinking the same thing.
That's terrific, terrific. Let me toss out a different kind of question for the students, and that is, you know, there are people who are intrigued by this, and Katie, I know you kind of went, this is for me, you know, you got it. There are some kids who are kind of on the fence, and, you know, they're worried about leaving friends at home and the whole college admission piece, and they're just worried about it. What would you say, Katie and Harrison, to people who are on the fence about whether they should go to SWA?
Just do it. Just do it. I remember when I was deciding to leave St. Paul's, and, you know, I had my friend group, I had, you know, teachers that I liked, I, you know, felt comfortable in this place, but there was just this little kind of pit in my stomach or voice in my mind that just said, if you don't do this, you're going to regret it. And I just kind of took that voice into consideration, really listened to it, and I encourage any student who has that same feeling to just go with it. You will not be disappointed.
Good piece of advice.
And kind of on the other side of, like, I had that exact same feeling, like, I have to go do something, and I kind of want to do something crazy because I think it'll be great. But I think a lot of the worry can be over, like, what will my year look like and what will it be like, and I'll be so far away from home. And I think something that students don't realize is when you join SYA, I mean, Italy was a small group, and you really get a new family. And I would say my SYA family is equally as important to me as my family back at home. My host parents and I text all the time. I text them, you know, every day. We're kind of checking in, seeing how things go. I miss them all the time. The conversation is like, when are you coming back? It's like, I am trying. I can't get over there. They won't give me a visa, but if I could, I would be spending this entire year there. And I think, as you've seen, like, we have all of these fond memories from everything, like the professors, the people, Viterbo itself. Everyone wants you to be there. And so even if it's a really challenging year, even if you kind of trip along the way, which everyone will, there are more people than you could ever imagine that are there to, like, make the year phenomenal. And that's something that is hard to find. I think that same type of community here in the United States, because in Italy, we're all physically a lot closer. We're all around a much smaller city. And so you can't be spread out. Even if you live in the country, you're coming back to this tiny little town every day. And that in itself provides a community. But also, it's just the most fun you'll ever have. I think Harrison can probably agree. Every single day, like, I love college. College has been amazing, even with all of the pandemic. But there's not a day I think about going back to Italy. Like, every single day, I would trade almost anything. I would pay millions of dollars to get to go to SYA again. So if that says anything, like, just go for it. That's
great. And Harrison, you actually now have two SWA families. For a year in Spain, and do you keep in touch with both?
Well, I try to. I mean, it's you know, there's group chats and stuff like that you can go to. I mean, you can try that route, but it's more so that that experience as a whole. I mean, the things that you go through, or not necessarily go through, but the things that you experience through that year with those people is something that's almost sacred in a sense. And it's something that is never going to fade away. I've seen multiple people from both of my SYA families, and I can tell you, it's like nothing has changed. It's like I got on the plane yesterday, and I'm seeing them the next day after Spain. And I think that those are bonds that definitely do last a lifetime.
And Harrison, I mentioned earlier that Katie's majoring in Italian. How's your SYA work affected your choices at Georgetown?
So I was really on the edge about choosing. Well, I'm in the SFS, so I have to be by SFS standards proficient in a
That's
language.
the foreign service school.
Foreign
right?
services,
Yeah.
And I chose to do Spanish, and I got my proficiency in within a year. I had to do 1 year of required classes, but I got it in the minimal amount of time, which should be a testament to how well SYA does at the thing that it is best at, which is teaching language. And I am considering doing, since I did get my proficiency in Spanish, I'm thinking, why not go for Italian too? But I'm on edge about it, but probably will end up doing that.
Terrific. That's great to hear. Pat, do you have any thoughts about their year with you? Any summative comments you want to make about their time at SWA?
I just want to very much thank them and let them know that I think about them all the time. They left a really great mark on us. They were part of a group that really clicked here. And, you know, what we do as teachers is we talk about how to make students grow. And I think I alluded to it earlier, but it'd be nice now that Harrison could hear it, that we got a lot of gratification from them in the moment. And we think about you guys fondly. We're really grateful for your patience because we're experimenting with a lot of things ourselves. The one thing about Fieldwork is when we were doing it with you is it's, you know, a teacher might get an evaluation at the end of the year, even at the semester, and may retool some things. We were getting feedback from you guys every week and having to make adjustments. And so we learned a great deal, and it couldn't have been possible if you guys hadn't been so patient with us. So I just want to say thanks for that.
Great. And I want to thank you too also for taking time out of, I know, busy schedules, and good luck with all that. And let me kind of bring this to a close, unless there are other questions from the group out there, but let me make some comments. And if there are, you can post them right now. Well, one thing is, you know, I brought up earlier that question of, you know, what would you say to kids on the fence who are looking at SYA? This year is a really interesting one for us on a number of levels, including the fact that our admissions reps who used to, you know, spread out over the country and literally get into schools, make presentations, meet with folks face to face, that can't happen right now. So we're doing virtual meetings. And so what I make a request of any alum out there is your word of mouth can be incredibly helpful to us, particularly this year. So if you know of someone who might be interested, even start them on the younger side, because Katie, you mentioned you know, it was a few years and you kind of thought about it and said that's the thing to do. Please reach out and encourage people, get them connected to our website, and you can get them connected to our admissions team in North Andover, Mass. So I encourage people to do that. Also, if you've already made a contribution to SWA, we thank you tremendously for your support of us and our faith in what we do. If you haven't had a chance to make a gift, we're here to gladly talk with you one-on-one. So please reach out to us. And also, if you encourage your classmates to make gifts, and I know the young alums always have this challenge of which country is in the young alum group, and that's 10 years out or younger. Which one's going to raise more money? So you guys I have faith in you that Italy is going to shoot to the top on that challenge when we launch it. And lastly, just encourage all alums to read their emails. We send out an SWA Now newsletter every month. We send out invitations, and you know, the traditional way for us to connect with alums is that we used to, again, fan out not only in the country, but you know, I often go to London or Paris and do events. And that's going to be curtailed. But what's sprung up, which is really nice, which is kind of virtual class reunion. You know, you can just organize a class reunion on Zoom, and it would be fun. And a lot of classes have done that, so I encourage people to do that. And again, this has been a delightful conversation, and can't thank you two students enough. And Pat, I know you're busy all the time, and you always are there for us. So thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, why don't you sign off in some Italian for us, Pat?
Arrivederci ragazzi, grazie di esserci stati e poi ci vediamo, va bene?